Call to order of the Dickinson Board of Equalization meeting for Thursday, April 15th, 2021. Let the record show we have 4 commissioners present, 1 absent, Commissioner Frederick. Mr. Hirschfeld, I need to inquire that the clerk has a copy of the published notice, and the meeting has been published. Has the local assessor completed and assessed all and entered all into the assessment roll?
Mr. Chairman.
All right. You got that turned down a little bit? So. And then we'll proceed to the assessor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I sent over to you the assessor's highlight sheet. I'll just kind of read from this. Sent you several other reports, and feel free to ask me any questions off of those if you had any. But the 2021 valuation that the assessor's office is bringing to you, the 2021 commercial value is $1,071,541,744. That's down just slightly from 2020, which was $1,073,464,544. Residential true and full valuation for 2021 was $1,491,618,000, up from last year's $1,462,718,300. So the overall true and full valuation for 2021 is $2,563,159,744, as compared to 2020's $2,536,182,844. We had new construction for commercial properties last year of $13,894,900. Residential had new construction growth of $18,324,780 for a total of just over $32,300,000. There were some decreases to commercial of $17,519,000. The bulk of that was the sale of the American Bank Center to the city and the sale of the Halliburton building to the school district. Both of those are now exempt, so that value came off, and that's the bulk of that $17 million. The taxable valuation for 2021 is $120,699,897. That's up from $119,495,551. That is the value that the auditor's office will attribute mills to divvy out for the budgets. The commercial sales had a median ratio of 91.8%. Residential properties had a ratio of 90.4%. After doing market adjustments for new construction increases, any revaluations, those supplemental ratios adjusted in at 91.9% for commercial and 91.1% for residential. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, both our commercial and residential are within state mandated tolerances at this time. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Are there any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on his report?
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman?
90% is the threshold, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? Mr. Hirschfeld, we will move into tax abatements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 abatements left over from November 1st. Because of other time commitments, owners' requests, in order to get us data, we've gone ahead and held these back until this hearing. The properties left are Sierra Ridge, RFM Trade Jefferson Apartments and RFM Trade Lincoln Apartments. This abatement is for the 2018 valuation year. The true and full value for the Sierra Ridge property is $28,586,200. And this sheet should be in your front sleeve here so that you've got that to follow as well. The abatement request for Sierra Ridge is $20 million.
There is currently one person in the conference.
And for reference sake, the 2020 value was $23,221,500, down significantly from the peak valuation in 2015 of $45 million. Staff recommendation for Sierra Ridge is no change. RFM Trade Jefferson Apartments has a true and full value of $4,664,200. Abatement request of $1,750,000. The peak for this property was $7,284,000. Its current value is down significantly as well. And then with RFM Trade Lincoln Apartments, the true and full value was $21,280,200. The abatement request for it is $14,585,000, and it too is significantly decreased from its peak. And with that, we can turn it over to any questions you have, or we can allow the representation for the property owners to give their reasonings for their decrease.
Mr. Hirschfeld, who is joining us by telephone?
I'm not sure if it's Mr. Rom or Mr. Tibbles that'll be joining us from the attorney's office, from Frederickson Byron.
Mr. Tibbles or Mr. Rom?
This is Mr. Rom. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm watching you out of the corner of my eye on one screen and talking to a phone, so it's a little bit disorienting. I'm glad you can hear me okay. Thank you for allowing us to appear by telephone and to address the commission. We sent over yesterday through Mr. Hirschfeld additional information, a sort of a summary executive memorandum, a longer memorandum, and then some spreadsheets. Have those been provided to you?
Mr. Chairman, they have. If you go to your blue binders, that's our supplemental information.
Yes, they have.
It'll be up behind the green tab.
Thank you. If you would look at the summary memorandum, it's only 2 pages. I'm certainly not going to read it to you. I just want to briefly go over a few points. You'll see there on the front, there is a little chart we put together. And essentially what we've done, you've heard us before. And what we generally do, and similar to what we've done this year, is we provide financial information for the year leading into the assessment. And then we calculate a value using an income approach, and then we generally ask for that value. And we have heard you in the past question that for at least 2 reasons. One criticism we've heard is that we don't take into account the city's cost approach. Another criticism we've heard is that we maybe are using, that the actual numbers we use, we should actually be using maybe a market rent or a different cap rate. And so this year what we wanted to do was try to address both of those concerns. So one way we've done that is, if you look at the chart there, you'll see that what we've done is where there's a column that says cost approach. That is essentially the true and full value that comes out of the cost approach that Mr. Hirschfeld's office used. Then there's the income approach that summarizes our approach that's in the Excel spreadsheets we've given you using the actual data. And then we essentially have a column that says even weighting. So we essentially add them up and divide by 2. So we sort of go 50-50 value for each of the 2 approaches. And then you'll see that that tracks pretty closely into our requested value. You'll see 2 footnotes. We originally asked for lower values on 2 of them, one sort of marginally and one by a little bit, but we have raised those as we're allowed to do. And so we're asking you tonight to abate to that level that says requested value, which essentially takes a 50% weighting of Mr. Hirschfeld's cost approach and a 50% weighting of our income approach. So the second thing I would say is, with respect to the income approach, we've been provided with Excel spreadsheets, and I don't know if you have them on the computer or just on paper, but the idea was that we could work through those together if you want. So I have them up on my computer, and if you say, look, I think we need to change your income, your rents, market rent's too low, your expenses are off, we can adjust those and look at them together and see where they play out. Again, we stand by these numbers, but we're open to the possibility that there's a criticism that Mr. Hirschfeld might want to make, and so we can adjust those kind of in real time to try to get to a better number. Now, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll answer questions or turn it back to Mr. Hirschfeld, is that I've received Mr. Hirschfeld's what he calls his summary. He indicates that he's done sort of his version of this, but his income approach ends up being virtually the same as the cost approach, and he uses a gross income multiplier of 10. That's a pretty high GIM. We're not sure where that came from, and it implies a capitalization rate. We've used a base cap rate of 9.75%. The capitalization rate, as I'm sure you know, is the idea that you figure out how much money you'd make in 1 year, and then you have to use a rate to spread that over a couple years to figure out how quickly an investor would be looking to get a return of capital back. We've used a base rate of 9.75 and then added the tax into that to get to a loaded cap, what's called a loaded cap rate of 11%. The reason we need a loaded cap rate is we don't put our taxes in our expense line because we think they're too high, and so that would distort the taxes. So we take them out and put them in the capitalization rate. The gross income multiplier that Mr. Hirschfeld suggests would imply a capitalization rate of under 3% if I'm doing my math right. And I don't think any of these properties would have traded at a cap rate of under 3% or even near 3%, frankly, in this time frame in 2018. And I think Mr. Hirschfeld would agree with me that they wouldn't trade at a capitalization rate of 3. So again, what we've tried to do is to be fair to everybody, to say that we'll give equal weighting to our approach, show the work behind our approach, equal weighting to the approach Mr. Hirschfeld's office uses, and come up with a value that we think does in fact reflect the true and full value. So we would respectfully request that you abate these values as set forth on the summary memorandum. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we'll turn it back to Mr. Hirschfeld, and then would ask simply for permission to respond to any points he makes if he'll allow me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Odermatt?
in the numbers here, what's considered a unit? Is it just a single apartment is considered a unit?
That's correct.
I guess I think there's a lot of people in town that would love to find an apartment that's only $881 a month.
So if I may ask, sir, which one are you looking at?
I'm looking at Jefferson Creek, but Lincoln and Sierra Ridge have similar numbers in that $800 range, and just my anecdotal experience in town, finding an apartment under $1,000 is like finding a diamond in the rough right now. And I know going back to 2018, it was the same story. So I guess I'm just having a hard time.
I'm sorry.
I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around those numbers with the rent per unit being that low.
Again, we provided the income statements to Mr. Hirschfeld. I mean, we think this is the rent that reflects what we actually got. With that said, as I said, I'm happy to. I mean, I have a spreadsheet here. I'm happy to plug a different number in there, and we can see what happens to it in order to try to get to what you think is right. We can see where it goes. If you think a market rent is a higher number, I can plug that in and tell you what the impact is.
Mr. Hirschfeld, I mean, do you have an explanation as to why that number is what it is?
Mr. President, Commissioner Odermatt, I didn't. This information you're looking at here, I got yesterday. I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Because I was in the market for an apartment back in, summer of 19, and we were looking at $1,500.
For nicer properties such as that.
Yeah, exactly. For comparable.
So to answer
This is an average.
answer the question, if you plug in, say, $1,000 into your formula, how much of we don't have the spreadsheet here, so we wouldn't know. We'd have to take your word, what you plugged in, your valuation.
Sure. I mean, Mr. Hirschfeld has the spreadsheet. I'm not trying to hide the ball. I can email it to anybody live right now if you like. If I plug in $1,000 and leave every other number the same, the indicated value goes to $2.69 million. It goes up by about $500,000. Actually, 2.69. So it goes up by about 500,000.
And like I said, I'm asking that question based on anecdotal evidence and nothing to really support it outside of that. That was a little off, it seemed.
And that was the property that you plugged those numbers in were Jefferson Apartments, right?
That's the one you had suggested, right? I'm happy to do it for any others, and I'm also happy to send the spreadsheet across, and you can do it, or it's your meeting, of course, but if you want to take time to table it, we wouldn't object. We're trying to be transparent about this.
Mr. Chairman, like I said, that information was new to me. I haven't had a chance to look at it other than to put it together for tonight. But if you would, right behind that green tab, there was this blue chart here. And most of this is already included in the summary that I sent to you, but I did update it for 2021 because that property will be heard for the 2021 appeal here in a little bit. So that income from 2020 has been included. But when I go through here, and we can argue cap rates, GIMs all night long. Our 10 GIM came from the market, local market. It's a little bit dated. GIM, I understand that for newer properties, but at the same time, we calculated an 8 GIM for older properties, which is pretty typical to be a point or two behind. Just simply there's more maintenance, more expenses as the building gets older. So that's why the older ones usually get discounted. We've had sales of older apartment buildings. They're still showing right in at a 7.5 or an 8 gross income multiplier. So we see no reason to think that a 10 gross income multiplier is not accurate for newer properties. But as we go through here, and you see that TNF has true and full value. That's the assessed value for the Sierra Ridge property from 2016 to 2021. And then right beside that's income, and that's the income of the property. Now that's multiplied with the 10 GIM, so if you divide it by 10, you knock off that trailing zero at the end. That would be the actual income as reported to us. So our true and full value, as you sum it up from 2016 to the current year, is $120 million. Income would have supported $156 million worth of valuation. Owners are requesting $72 million, and then if you weight that 2/3 to the true and full and 1/3 to the income, it's $132 million. If you weight it 50-50, it would be $138 million if you considered income being should be weighted at 50%. If there's a valuation issue with this property, it's because it's undervalued. Certainly going down through the years, you can see where the income had dropped off, and maybe the income didn't support what the true and full is, but that's not the case at the time that building was erected. It's not the case in the current market right now.
But Mr. Hirschfeld, I'm looking at the income here, and it has rebounded a little bit since 2019.
It
actually
has.
going up.
Yes. Yeah, we've turned the corner. We bottomed in 17, 18 there. And just for argument's sake, to say, all right, maybe a 10's too high. So go back with an 8, same GIM that our old properties have. That would be the orange chart right behind it. The income still supports what the true and full value is. Even down there at an 8, where our old properties are showing what the gross income multiplier is. And so I don't support an 8, but I mean, we could drop that 20%, our gross income multiplier 20%, and still be in line with the true and full value. So I can't support going any lower than that.
Are there any comments from representation?
Again, I don't want to just repeat myself. You have our position that the gross income multiplier, please remember, it's exactly that. It's gross income, not net. So it's not the total profit that anybody would have made off of that. It's the gross rent times 10. Again, I think that's high, and it implies, and I think Mr. Hirschfeld would have to agree, that gets you to a cap rate, something like 3%, and it would be different, of course, if we change the rent. We could noodle that around, but I think it's high. Again, I'm not coming in asking for the absolute bottom end that we calculate with some kind of really aggressive income approach. We're trying to do a 50-50 weighting is what we think is a reasonable income approach, and so we, again, respectfully request that you would abate the properties as requested.
So for Sierra Ridge, your weighted request at 50-50 would be what?
I'm shuffling paper here. I apologize. It's Sierra Ridge at 50-50 be 20 million, 19.14, so about 20 million. So, even weighting would be 19, but we requested 20, so, we're moving it up $1 million.
That's what, a $3 million change from what you've assessed, Joe?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Oderman, because we're going back to 2018, this is the abatement, and not this year's, it would be an $8 million, $8.5 million difference.
Because at that time,
Oh, okay, yes.
it was 28,586, right? 28,586.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Request is 20 million.
I have a question. This is my first Board of Equalization meeting, and is this common that we get these 2 years delayed like this, or this seems, or 2.5, I guess? This seems like a, rather long time ago that we're looking at.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Soboluk, Century Code allows them to go back 2 years from the current valuation year, so that would be 2018. The filing date for that's November 1st. Statute says we're supposed to hear it in the first 60 days because of some multitude of reasons. These 3 properties have been continued a little further, so it's not typical that they get held from, the last possible date to this hearing, but it is that they do have 2 years to go back. In my opinion, that is so we can go back and if there was an error on the property record card, say that we had a whole row of garages valued on there, but they'd burned and been torn down, and our office hadn't been out there to recognize that and reduce that value, that we could go correct that card and remove that value. Not come back 3 years later and try and then hash out what we should have known or could have known or might have known about incomes that weren't provided this very night 3 years ago.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff or representation? Any other questions? Does the owner representation have any other information they'd like to provide to the commission, to the Board of Equals?
No, thank you. We provided quite a bit of information. I'm sure sitting and reading rent rolls is not something you're looking to do a lot of, but we did provide all that stuff. With respect to the last question, again, normally we do have 2 years to go back. We may not always be going back this far in the future. I'm not sure. But again, normally we do hear these things. If we file in November, we generally hear them before the end of the year. We appreciate Mr. Hirschfeld's flexibility, the combination of the pandemic and some other matters that he has going and that I have going. He's been very accommodating and setting a convenient time, and we really do appreciate that.
Did you want to provide any other information to us about property that we did not talk? You're representing 3 properties this evening, am I correct?
That's correct, and we've provided sort of identical information for all 3. I don't have anything else to add that's separate for each one. Again, they're each apartments. For each, we provided the underlying financial information in Mr. Hirschfeld plus these summaries. So again, it's sort of an identical analysis for each one. The numbers change, of course, because they're different buildings with different rental rates and different numbers of units, and some are 1-bedroom and some are 3-bedroom, and so that rent ends up being kind of a blended, across the building. But there's nothing that I can tell you about one building that's in this, for the purposes of this analysis, that's all that's different than a different one. So again, we've gone with the 50-50 weighting on all 3.
And I just want to clarify your requested values. On the Jefferson Apartments, our valuation is $4,664,200. Your request is $3,406,898.
That's correct.
And on the Lincoln Apartments, our valuation is $21,280,200, and your request is for $14,746,162.
That's correct.
And on Sierra Ridge, or as it's listed here, S&B Dickinson Apartments LLC, it is $28,586,200. Our valuation, and your request is $20 million.
Again, correct. Thank you.
So as the board, the board makes a decision. Mr. Hirschfeld, does your office have anything else to add?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, at this time, even with the additional information that we've heard tonight, our recommendation would still be to remain with the values that we placed on the property in 2018. Make no changes.
Are there any additional questions from commissioners? We have 3 options as a equalization board. We can take staff recommendation. We can go with the owner's requested value, or we can make a determination on our own. So is there any information that Board of Equalization would like to hear before we make a determination? I see a lot of calculators going, so for those listening online and watching, they're figuring.
Mr. President, do we take
Sure.
one of these at a time?
Yes,
or-
we have to do one at a time, so. And we have to list on your chart here, you have the PID, that's the property identification, Mr. Hirschfeld, that is correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, so we'd have to do one at a time, Commissioner Oderman. So if any time the commissioner wishes to make a motion, again, our three options are staff recommendation, the owner representation request, or we come to valuation that we feel as a Board of Equalization is appropriate.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman?
so Mr. Hirschfeld, on your illustration here, so we've got the true and full value, 28,586,200 for 2018 on Sierra Ridge. And then you've got there's not much difference there between the weighted 6733 and the weighted 50/50 from the true and full. But later on, there is a significant difference. Can you just explain to me how that's calculated and why that plays out the way it does?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Oderman, certainly. Part of our valuation process, we utilize the information that we have available to us. And so in 2015, it's not on this year here, but that was when we had our commercial revaluation done by Vanguard Appraisals. And this property was under construction at that time, wasn't complete, wasn't fully operational. And so, not a good indicator what the value is. Didn't have, I don't believe, income data at that time. So we started with 2016. And if we recall, 2014 was kind of the peak, the boom, 15 kind of plateaued off, and then stuff started slowing down in 2016, 17, 18, and that's reflected in the income. The income for Sierra Ridge and the income where it shows for 2016, that's actually 2015's income, because our valuation date is February 1st of the year, and so the income data would come from the year prior. So in 2015, the income for that property was $3.9 million, almost $4 million worth of income. And so we calculated that, the gross income multiplier based off of current sales. We review that as we have sales to make sure that's still accurate. And with the 10 gross income multiplier, the income approach would support a nearly $40 million valuation. And as you can see, and it's not on, we have it on one of the sheet here, its peak valuation was $45 million. So we were pretty close at that time, considering we were off the peak. And then in 2017, the valuation decreased to $3 million, and that was 2016 income. So we're always a year behind on that. And you see that income had dropped off from nearly $4 million to $2.8 million in 2017. That was the low point. And so that value continues to get lower. Well, we get to that point, and we're having a lot of apartment owners come in. Oil field activities decreased, oil's decreased. You know, there's surplus labor in the market at that point, and we had a market revaluation done. And based off of that, in 2019, there was a large decrease made to apartments by Vanguard's. Vanguard Appraisal Service. They did our 2019 valuation for us again, reviewed our market. And it just so happens that all of the data that we had was trailing, and we made this large decrease to $23 million on this property, and now our income's going the other way and we're behind. We don't have sales to support an increase. We've got the pandemic, but as you can see, the income is increasing at this time. And so now we're undervalued on this property, and it's something I've been saying for several years, and through the peak of the trough there, I was getting laughed at, but the process may be slow in reacting, but it does catch up. And we do reflect what the market value of that property is, and certainly when you get to that bottom number down there, if we decrease that, we're just throwing that off further.
I guess what I'm struggling with is I'm looking at these income numbers, and we want a lower valuation per the owner's request. However, the income is creeping upwards, and if they were to sell that building, I doubt that they're not going to get. I mean, with the income that they're receiving on that property, I really doubt that they're going to sell for what they want it valued at, what they're requesting, with the income and the revenue that they're generating with that property.
don't think it'll go on the market for 20.
Do you think it'll be lower than that, or you think?
No.
Yeah, well, exactly.
No,
That's
no, I agree.
That's exactly my point, is if you're selling that building right now, those buildings, you're not selling it for 20 million with the income that they're generating.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Orman, that is the only time hindsight benefits us, is we know for a fact that they didn't list that property for $20 million at that time. It didn't go up for sale. I mean, there were properties that were, and some of them that didn't sell, and some that have been lost over the period, but this property did not get listed for 20 million.
Are there any other questions?
With my argument having been made there, I would move to approve the city assessor's recommendation for the valuation on Sierra Ridge.
We have a motion on the table to stay with the city's assessment, or assessed value of Sierra Ridge. And this is for the property of, listed as S&B Dickinson Apartments 1168-0200-0100. Am I correct in my PID number?
That is correct.
So the motion is no change by Commissioner Oderman.
I'll second that motion.
We have a second by Commissioner Soboluk. Any further discussion or questions? There are no further questions or discussion. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. The next item up will be Jefferson Apartments. Are there any questions for staff or owner representation on the Jefferson Apartments? And this is RFM TREI Jefferson Apartments, PID 1140-0700-0100. The full and true value as listed by city staff is $4,664,200. The abated request is $1,750,000. No, I got that. That is not correct. On your abated request is $3,406,898. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
And we have a different on our chart here. I have 1.75.
And Mr. Chairman, that gray is the abatement request. That is the value that is on the abatement application itself.
Okay,
So
so the actual, this memorandum that I have here is for $3,406,898.
That seems to be an alternative number that would be acceptable to them tonight.
Okay. And they have that, they have confirmed that that's the number, so. So are there any questions for staff or representation? Again, we have three options. We can stay with staff recommendation, owner request, or we can come to a number that we find justifiable on this property. There are no further questions. I would look for a motion on Jefferson Apartments.
Mr. President, so the
Mr. Oderman?
requested value they're looking for is 3.4?
Yes. $3,406,898. And it does have on their memorandum, if you look on page 1 to the bottom, it says taxpayer originally requested a lower value of $1,750,000, but have revised the request upwards. And that also goes for the next property, the Lincoln Apartments. They have 2 notes stating they have changed their request.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman?
I would make a motion of an assessed value of $4 million.
We have a motion by Commissioner Oderman to make an adjusted rate determined by the Board of Equalization of $4 million.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. Any further questions or comments? Before we do a vote, I'm just doing some quick math. With no further questions or comments, we'll go ahead and vote. And this is for RFM TREI Jefferson Apartments, PID 1140-0700-0100 to an adjusted rate of assessed value of $4 million. And that is motion by Commissioner Oderman, second by Commissioner Walla. If there are no further comments, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Ms. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Last property we have is RFM TREI Lincoln Apartments, 8021-0200-0200. City assessed value is $21,280,200. The request from ownership is $14,746,162. And that has changed from your chart slightly. The original request was $14,585,000.
You know, and I'd like to just kind of explain my reasoning there. I think these last two are a little bit different than that first one because the true and full value is ahead of the income lags on the true and full value. So I do think that there is room for maybe some conversation in regards to the valuation. As you know, on that first one it was true and full value of 120 million, I think, and income was 127. And so these both, the income lags behind the true and full value. So I feel like there is maybe a little bit of room here for some adjustment to the assessed value. And that's on, and that's on the total line item, but I think I communicated that clearly enough to make it understandable. Maybe it's clear as mud, but.
Commissioners, again, we have three options. One, we can stay with staff recommendation. Two, owner request. Three, an adjustment to the valuation made by the Board of Equalization. The request on this property is for $14,746,162. Our assessed value is $21,280,200.
We don't have any numbers for 2020 yet on income on this one?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Overman, no, I mean, it's typical that we don't get the information until 2 years later at abatement hearings.
Good.
And so then I fill it in, so we didn't have anything in 18 and nothing now
Yep.
yet either,
Right.
so. But judging by the trend, this one's increasing as well, so.
Commissioners, any recommendations? Motion towards presented value, requested value, or Board of Equalization adjustment?
Mr. President, I would move to assess the value at 17 million.
Okay. I guess as Commissioner Oderman, you have your adjustment would be
Based more on that income side, comparing them.
I tend to be a little bit north of that, but if we're using the income.
See, I was gonna say meet them in the middle between the true and full, and I'm looking at the wrong number here. Sorry.
Right.
probably was going off of kind of what you based the other one off of.
Yeah.
More around 18, 19 million
Yep.
versus 17.
It was actually, and the numbers I was calculating, 19.6, 19, so
19?
19? Yeah, amend yours.
So I could amend my motion to 19 million?
If-
I'll second.
Okay. We have amended to 19 million for the Lincoln Apartments, 8021-0200-0200. That was for 19 million. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that was by Commissioner Soboluk, and the second was by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion?
Mr. President, just
Mr. Odom.
just the point of order here. I don't have to show my work, do I?
Yes, you do.
The math problem's only correct if you show the work. Come on,
Yeah.
now.
In Cornell.
Okay. So just to clarify, it is for a value of 19 million, your adjusted valuation.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Soboluk?
Aye.
Mr. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Representation, is there any further comments?
No, I appreciate very much your diligent work on this. We do appreciate it. I did like the first motion, or it was amended a little bit better than the second version, but thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. Miss,
Have a nice evening.
you also.
Bye.
Mr. Hirschfeld, are there any other abatements?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, there are no other abatements this evening.
Okay. We'll move into the assessment roll, and the board may change the valuation and assessment of any real property upon the roll by increasing and or diminishing the assessed valuation thereof, or shall be reasonable to render taxation uniform according to North Dakota Century Code 57-11-0-03. Are there any properties that the commission is aware of that we need to equalize or correct on the assessment roll?
Was the assessment roll the information you shared with us right away when we got here, the summary of all the numbers?
The assessment roll is the values that we've put on the properties are put in the roll like this, and that way there's no change. The numbers that you have are the true and full value, which is the sum of all the values that are in the roll.
Thank you.
And so at this point, we're taking any protest, anybody who doesn't feel like
Right.
their value's accurate, and we'll see if needs any of those need correcting.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward, state your name, and just provide us with information on your property that we may hear your grievance if there was a valuation that you are not agreeable to? Anyone from the audience? Is there anyone on the phone that has property they wish to discuss their valuation? This is the part of the session that you come forward if you have any grievances to the assessment roll. Please come forward, state your name, and the board may correct your errors.
Just one more clarifying question. So this would be me asking about the paper that I got in the mail at my private residence if I was unhappy with that value. correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
Commissioner
perfect.
Sobeluk.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, while we're waiting for anybody to call in, in the supplemental folder that you have behind the pink tab, Sierra Ridge has a company that they work with outside of who we just had on the phone there, who was appealing their 2021 valuation. The same company is appealing a couple others, but at this time I don't have a letter of authorization from those owners, and I don't know if they actually have authorization to appeal those, but I know they do for Sierra Ridge, so we probably should at least bring this one up since they did submit the information late Friday afternoon. Other than pulling the income data out of this one for the prior abatements, I really haven't had a chance to look at this, other than it appears that their incomes are going up and we didn't change our valuation. So I'd struggle to support any decrease to this property.
Has the board found that information, everyone looking at it, that Mr. Hirschfeld is talking about? Yes.
It's a reconstructed year-end income and expense statement right after the pink divider.
Right. And besides that property, the other one behind the blue, is that another one that's appealing?
The blue and the yellows are both being appealed by Sterling. I thought maybe they'd be on the phone this evening, but I don't have a letter of authorization from them. And we can check with Ms. Walla and see whether that's something we should bring up tonight. The importance of this is if they don't come before this board, I'm sorry, not Ms. Walla, Ms. Wanko. It's been a long week. I can't even read the sign from here. But the importance of whether it's heard tonight or not is if it's not heard, then they're not eligible to be heard at the state. They would still be eligible to go forward to the county, but they would not be eligible to take it to the state.
Okay, well, they don't have representation online nor here. So they've just basically submitted to you a document saying that
A one-page document saying that the assessor's
won.
office is incorrect.
No.
So even though they don't have representation here tonight, them being on the docket here, so to speak, allows them to appeal it at the county and the state level.
The state has found that to be adequate, yes.
Okay. That's likely why they're,
right. So
Not
do
here.
we need to rule on this then?
That is correct, Mr.
Separately?
Chairman.
Okay, so while we're waiting for other people to call in or come forward, commissioners, do you have any further questions for staff on the Sierra Ridge indicated real estate? They would like it to be $18,499,237. Their assessor's value is $23,401. They have a difference of about 18,000 per unit is what they're basically asking for. So we'd need a motion on this property.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to throw that out there, you should have in front of you a listing sheet on an apartment here in Dickinson. This just came to our attention. That's a 40-unit structure. They're all efficiencies. Kitchenettes basically is what are in that property. But we have it assessed just a shade over $2 million. They're asking $4,400,000. Granted, that's asking not a sale price, but that's over double where we're at. That's $110,000 a unit valuation on a property that's nowhere near as nice a property as the Sierra Ridge is. Just for additional information for you.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman?
I'd move to approve the assessor's proposed market value on this reconstructed year-end income and expense statement.
Commissioner Oderman has motion to keep the assessed value at $23,401,000.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. The blue property in here behind the blue tab, Mr. Hirschfeld, that was submitted to you by, it is Custer Crossing, Ravenwood. And I'm trying to figure out what they are asking for in here.
And again, Mr. Chairman, just want to reiterate whether we want to give this one legs or not, as I do not have a letter of authorization from the owners granting this company the right to bring this before us. I would again defer over to Mrs. Wanko whether we want to legitimize this or not.
Mr. Hirschfeld, just for clarification, you would need an letter of authorization from which entity?
We had asked for a letter of authorization from ownership stating that the Sterling Group is representing them in this proceeding. And they're, not this year, but in past years, we've had 2 and 3 different tax reps trying to bring forth the same property. And so it was pretty obvious at that point that they were on a fishing expedition trying to get a decrease and then saying, hey, we got you a decrease, will you pay us for it?
And you have nothing from owner reps?
Not for these next 2 properties, not my files.
And the 2 properties are the Custer Crossing and Ravenwood?
That is correct.
No.
And Mr. Hirschfeld, just for clarification, on the blue paper with it says appeals and then it says Custer Crossing Owner LLC Ravenwood. And then the next set of paperwork, I believe, is what they have submitted, and then their signature pages. I believe it's looking like page 2, but it's page 4 if you go front to back. And that one is signed by Dickinson 16 LLC. And then on the next page, it's signed by Custer Crossing Owner LLC. Authorized representative.
Matthew Lester.
Yes. Is that not sufficient for your authorization, or are you looking for something more?
Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Wanko, those signatures appear to go with this settlement statement where this property was a short sale and transferred from the prior owners to the current owners. And so those signatures go with that and not necessarily with the, for them to be represented by Sterling Group.
And Mr. Hirschfeld, you did communicate that with the owner, that authorization needed to be received by the city, or was there some sort of communication to the representative or this entity that was providing the request?
At 4:45 Friday afternoon, I received this. Because I was out earlier in the week, I was actually here after hours on Friday, and I mean, immediately I returned an email saying I would like updated information because some of it was 3 years old and I needed a letter of authorization. They responded back they would get that to me, and I haven't received that yet. I haven't received any correspondence back since Friday afternoon.
And I'm trying to decipher in here, what are they asking for? What's our valuation on it, and what are they asking for? I see a purchase price in here, or a loan amount, but do we know what they're asking for exactly?
Mr. Chairman, no, this is the sum total of what I got. Again, I think they're putting this on the agenda to say that they were being heard before the city.
I guess, Commission, then it's up to us to determine if this is adequate representation. It doesn't seem like to me that Mr. Hirschfeld's request has been fulfilled. If they said they would get him that documentation and he has not received it, it's been more than 4 days.
Mr. Hirschfeld, it is customary policy for city policy to have an authorization signed by the owner in the event someone else is submitting. Is that correct?
That has been our office policy for several years, and it comes from when we had multiple tax representatives bringing the same property before us. Only one of them can be actually representing the property, and at that time we would have 2 or 3, and so the easiest way was let the owner decide who's representing them, and if we didn't get an LOA, a letter of authorization for any of them, then we wouldn't hear it.
And in the event the commission, or the board here made the decision not to hear the request as submitted, in this particular situation, does the applicant have an opportunity to appeal that board's decision?
It is my belief that the state board would probably hear that and make their own determination.
But they are for sure able to go to the county. Even if they don't present here, they can still go to the county.
Correct.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if we don't have any representation from either of these appeals, we don't need to belabor the point, and we can move on to the next order of business, I think.
We have no one else that, we need a motion to verify that?
Verify, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
That we don't have representation, that we're not going to hear this?
I think that procedurally, it's on the agenda. You're not
Okay.
making any direct action on it, so I
Okay.
don't believe that that would be necessary.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Winkle. Is there anyone else online or within the audience has any aggrieved property they wish to discuss?
Mr. President, I do have one quick question for Mr. Hirschfeld from a perspective from the state board. Will the state board require or need some affirmative denial of this request moving forward? Just want to make sure that not only the city has it, but the county has it, and the State Board of Equalization has what they need.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Wanko, if they were to ask to be heard at the board or in front of the state board, the staff for the tax department up there would contact us and see who presented here. I would explain what happened, that we had information but no LOA, nobody showed up to support it, no value even included in this, and that we didn't hear it. And I guess they would make their own determination then and whether they would allow it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Thank you.
All right, I will close the aggrieved portion. At this portion, are there any property owners that wish to add their property to our assessment roll? If you have been left out and wish to be placed upon the assessment roll, please come forward. Tell us about your property.
And Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting for that, the assessing department does not have anything to add either at this time.
Okay. That was my next question, if you know of any property that you missed. So, I'm sure you've been very thorough. Does anyone wish to add some property?
Has that ever happened?
Yep. Not in my 6 years. After the adjournment of the board, neither the governing body of the city nor the City Board of Equalization will change or alter the assessed value that was presented here tonight. Neither the governing body or the Board of Equalization reduce or abate or authorize the reduction, abatement, or return of any taxes levied upon the assessed upon such assessments for any cause except that the property assessed was not subject to taxation at the time of the assessment was made, and that is according to North Dakota Century Code 57-11-06. We'll move on to exempt applications. Commissioners, within your binder, the very last, you will look at the exempt property. They're very yellow at the end. That is all exempt property from the city tax rolls. Are there any questions on the exempt property? There is also, if you look at the very last, if you have any questions on why they're exempt, look at the very last sheet. There's a listing of exemptions. Be it place of worship, public charities, permit disabled. You can see, and each one that is exempt is listed. Are there any changes to the attachment A, Mr. Hirschfeld?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any changes to that. And while this is still being considered, one thing that's not on here, that as soon as we've considered those and made that motion, we do need to have a motion to accept the work that the board's done, to accept all these values as presented before we do our adjournment.
That is correct.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oderman?
I would move to approve the property tax exemption list.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Oderman to approve the property tax exemption list, second by Commissioner Sobeluk. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. To Mr. Hirschfeld's point, all the work that we have done this evening, we need a motion to approve any adjustments that we had made or the roll.
I'll move to approve the adjustments and the roll.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Sobeluk
I'll
to
second.
approve all work conducted here this evening, second by Commissioner Walla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Sobeluk?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Oderman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Hirschfeld, is there anything that I've missed?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I do not believe we've missed anything. I want to point out that I think this is the quickest Board of Equalization in the 11 years I've been here, and if we wouldn't have had the abatements, we'd have been out of here in under half an hour. Thank you very much.
So, hearing that, any further questions for Mr. Hirschfeld, staff, before? Hearing no questions, comments, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.